Welcome back to Beyond Classified. I'm Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is J.P. Hague. He is a researcher and writer with an interest in unidentified aerial phenomenon and the mysteries through a balanced approach and mindset. He is also the national director of MUFON in Mauritius. He considers esotericism, spirituality, and science to all be right tools and lenses for a better understanding of the layers of reality that surround and interact with us. JP, welcome back. How you doing?
Hey, Chris, thank you. That was a nice introduction. Thank you very much for that. It's good to be back with you. I think it's been about just over a year since we did a catch up on
Yeah,
over the airwaves.
it's been way too long. It's great to see
Yeah,
you again. And I have to tell you, ever
yeah.
since we met at the 2020 UFO MegaCon in Laughlin, which we were actually talking about a little bit, you've become such an amazing friend and colleague. And you were actually one of the first people that I contacted when I had my first contact experience, which we were also just talking about. So I want to thank you for being there and helping me better understand my experiences, as well as all the other extraordinary phenomenon that we've been discussing and attempting to understand together since the last time we spoke. And I'd love to hear, have you had any more profound, like unexplained experiences or sightings since the last time we talked?
Chris, well, just to respond to your thanks. No need to thank me. It's a pleasure and a duty, and we're here to support each other because there's so few coordinates in the public sphere, which we're going to address shortly, in working this out, apart from the kind of documentary trail and then the conference trail of witnesses and experiences and such like. So, we're all here to kind of help each other and not judge one another. And your experiences were incredible and absolutely commensurate with a lot of the cases that have been reported by reliable witnesses. So keep vigilant and document everything, and just try to relax. Don't get too overthink things, because it's bigger than our minds. Let's be honest.
Oh, yeah.
As for me, yes, I've had some extremely weird experiences. Maybe less than I have in recent years, but then I've been less engaged with the subject because of the lockdowns that have been happening over here in Mauritius in the Indian Ocean. Because frankly, you're with a family to support and professional life to manage. You're basically inside working and doing additional jobs that you wouldn't normally have to do. But that doesn't mean I haven't had some incredible experiences. I have. I mean, during the first lockdown in last year, I was on the phone or doing a conference with Johnny Enoch and Harry Challenger, the head of the Flying Saucer Review. And we were talking about contact and contact protocols that will need to probably be drafted and looked at if ever there is a more kind of grassroots open scenario that ever takes place. And at one time that would have sounded ridiculous, but when we have the Office of the Director of National Intelligence at the Pentagon sending us a report on the 25th of June this year, we need to start thinking about these things in a sort of mature and organized way, a bit like a United Nations outside of the mechanics of government, because nothing is happening there.
Right.
So anyway, we were having a discussion, and Harry's the head of the Flying Saucer Review. No sooner had I come off the phone, it was late at night because we're 3 to 4 hours ahead here in Mauritius. I went upstairs to get ready for bed, and I'm brushing my teeth in the bathroom, and the window's open because it's like the summertime here. It's very hot, and an enormous I got to say, it was just an enormous disc that looked a bit like the front section of the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek. It literally just appeared, stayed in the sky for a few seconds, and then disappeared. But it was like a transistor switch that was kind of going up and down. It was like phasing in and out of reality, and it happened about 2 or 3 times. And I just thought, is this trickery on the mind? Because I'm talking to Johnny, I'm talking to Harry. He's the head of the Flying Saucer Review. Is this just something operating in my subconscious, like the kind of Carl Jung concept of projecting consciousness into reality and getting a feedback. So anyway, that was during the first lockdown, and that was pretty amazing. Otherwise, I've seen, quite a few objects just kind of flying over me overhead where I live, just going for walks in the evening. Um, it seems to be very symbolic. Like you'll have several appear in a very short space of time, and they might intersect and cross each other perfectly as you're walking overhead, as if they're talking about cardinal points and north and south. And these have meanings in their own right in the esoteric sciences and all the rest. So yeah, there's been a lot going on, and I believe that it's better to have quality than quantity, and try to actually see if there's a meaning behind it that you can actually connect to. But it boggles the mind, and that's okay too. We shouldn't try and overanalyze things, like I was saying to you earlier. So yeah, it's been quite an interesting and challenging couple of years. And what was strange is that we met up in Laughlin at the 2020 UFO MegaCon, and no sooner did I get back to Mauritius, the lockdown started within a couple of weeks. So it was quite lucky, really, to get back and be with my family again. So yeah, interesting couple of years.
Yeah, it definitely has been. And tonight we're going to be talking a little bit. You have a very interesting report from the 90s from France, right? It's
That's
like a
right.
UAP report from the 90s that they did long before we even thought about doing any UAP reports. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about tonight. But you were just talking about, how everything has been, a pretty profound few years. And with these experiences that we were discussing earlier, we're talking about how it comes along with kind of like a new level of not only understanding, but intuition, and even sometimes new abilities after you've had your first contact experience. And I was talking to my guest last night about this, and it seems that this is across the board with contactees and experiencers. Once they've had this initial contact, something changes in their physiology, in their consciousness, to where something opens up, even with paranormal experiences sometimes. So that's very interesting. What do you think is actually going on with that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I mean, it's happened to me personally, whether people choose to believe that or not. I know it has. And it's interesting that you mentioned the word paranormal, because we're going to do a little kind of canter through this recent Pentagon report of June this year, and compare and contrast it to what was a real UAP report from France and a military think tank. And they actually include the concept of the paranormal. And they say we're not going to deny it, but we can't prove its veracity either. It's far more, let's say European and open-minded and genuine, intellectually honest about the subject, compared to this very closed report that comes from the Pentagon. But I think that there's so much of existence that's going on beyond visible light. So, when these experiences are happening, we don't fully understand what we're being exposed to. I mean, some of the cases that this French report deals with, for example, deals with the immobilization or freezing of witnesses. And, we could try and explain that through, the paranormal, but it's also potentially microwaves. So there is this, I believe, scientific basis to the changes that we're experiencing, whether it's a deeper sense of intuition or claircognizance, which just means knowing without knowing why, or clairsentience and feelings and all the rest of it. This is a commonly reported aspect to the phenomena. It's happened to me. It's happened to you. And I try to stay objective about it, and understand what has happened. So yeah, I think that it's valid. I think it's based in science, and I think that science and, as you know, spirituality overlap. They're basically different languages describing the same thing, perhaps. So that's my take on it. And what was amazing to read in this, let's say, a real report from France, is that it's taking all these things into account, and uh, this was put together by a bunch of serious researchers and led by a general from uh, the Institute of Higher Studies of National Defense, and it was also written by a division or air division leader, General or General Denis Letty of the French Air Force. So, I think that the military and the alphabet world of agencies are very aware of these things. I mean, there was a CIA report, and the CIA is an interesting alphabet agency that we'll touch upon, particularly in respect of this ODNI report from the Pentagon. Its absence in this report speaks to me.
Yeah, right. Now, with this French UAP report, could you give just a little bit of background how it came about? What was the year it came about? And you mentioned who was involved with it.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. So, I mean, this report is by what was called the Cometa Committee, and it's completely in French, and I'm bilingual in French and English, and the main language in Mauritius is French, so I have to speak it and read it and write it, but I also speak English here with those that can. So this is a report from the Cometa, which means the Comité d'études approfondies, which means the Committee of In-Depth Military Studies. It's a military think tank, and it's basically a report that was comprised of experts from this higher institute of national defense studies. It was chaired by a chap called General Bernard Norlin, and he was the former head of the Air Force in France during I believe in the 70s or 80s. And as I mentioned, the committee was presided by an active general, Denis Letty, of the Air Force. And I mean, this report was compiled over 3 years, Chris. It's quite a substantial report. It was written between 96 and 1999. There are approximately 16 members or contributors to the report. So yeah, 3 years of hard work, and amazingly, this military think tank based in Paris decided when the report was done that they were just going to hand it to the French Prime Minister, Monsieur Lionel Jospin, in '99 at the time. But it was without any requests from the Prime Minister himself or mandate. So there was no official convocation. But the military said, you know what, this is actually happening. We need to do this report. And whether you like it or not, mainstream government, we're going to give you this report. And predictably, there was no official reaction from the government, who are, relatively clueless compared to the military who have been compiling this. So the report is basically entitled, just speak in English, but it's basically UFOs and Defense. What must we prepare for? ? So it's an open question. And this report is it's 116 pages long. It's substantial compared to this, Pentagon report of effectively 6 pages of nothing. Well, there are things, and some things are hidden. And it's mature. It's a logical and transparent review that's basically put into 3 parts, and then has a conclusion on French and foreign cases that have taken place over 60 years. And it does look at national defense, but it's also looking at the social and cultural implications, which obviously, and educational aspects that go hand in hand, which was encouraging. So what we're seeing here is a much more holistic review compared to the US Pentagon one of 25th of June of this year, that's purely based in the context of threats, which means budget. Importantly, I guess what I need to really start by saying on this French military think tank report is that it confirms the physical reality of UFOs. And it does go as far as to say that there is a strong extraterrestrial hypothesis that is the most probable and credible explanation, which you don't get at all. Absolutely nothing mentioned, deliberately so, in the ODNI Pentagon report. What was amazing, Chris, was that when this report was published and given to the Prime Minister of France in '99, there was minimal to no media attention at all. despite, this think tank being in charge of national defense,
Yeah, I've never
including
heard
the
of this
leading
until
national
you mentioned it
newspapers.
to me when we were talking about doing this show.
Yeah, but this is it. There's so much media frenzy around this Pentagon report that tells us nothing compared to this amazingly in-depth and, cerebral report from France. And it didn't appear in the Figaro or Le Monde, which are the two kind of national newspapers still. And obviously even more relevant back in the 90s, where, there wasn't so much the internet as we have today. But it's an impressive document, and I think we'll go over the kind of key points. But the general who chaired this committee think tank says it's not just about a pure academic study. He says concrete problems are posed, and it's not only civil or military pilots that are involved, and that need some kind of response based on this report in terms of action. It has a much wider implication in society, and which is totally what we don't see with the Pentagon report. And even in the kind of preamble, it's saying, we envisage all kinds of hypotheses on the origin of these UFOs. And in particular, and it highlights the extraterrestrial explanation. And it basically, there was about 20 contributors to this report, all highly respected, linked to the military, scientists, and all the rest. And it's really impressive. And what I learned from reading this report page to page, all 116 pages of it, is that the French UFO study and reports predate the American US study of UFOs, which began officially around Roswell in July of 1947. But there were cases that were mentioned in the 20s of suits, standing behind scientists studying recovered craft back in the 20s. But Roswell was really the kind of the barometer at the time, and then moving into Project Blue Book. And I think I need to mention Blue Book a little bit later on and how it links to the Pentagon report that came out in June of this year. So this French report says that it's basically feeding the Institute of High Studies in National Defense as to what's actually going on, and the kind of the auspices of the organization have changed since the 90s, but it still exists, and it's part of this. It links into the French Space Agency too. So it is a serious report. It's very well structured. It goes over cases in France and in abroad, and I'm just going to touch on a few of them because they're amazing. Military and civil pilots in France who, were flying fighter craft jets, and objects were just buzzing them or cutting them up in front of their jets, and then going, over their aircraft, which are going at great speed, a Mirage 4 back in the late 70s, and then sitting behind the exhaust of the fighter jet. So absolutely amazing. Green glowing objects that easily outran these fighter jets back in the day. A case of Air France, the national air carrier of France, where unknown objects were just crossing the aircraft. And what's interesting is that in this particular case, with the Air France jet, I believe in the 70s, it talks about a lenticular shaped object, and it's very, very similar in description to what we know as the gimbal, which was this kind of bell-shaped, lenticular-shaped object that we see from the USS Nimitz footage, or gunfighter jet footage from the USS Nimitz in 2004, which made the New York Times back in 2017, etc. So it deals with some of these French cases. It deals with cases in the UK, and says that we are aware of the fact that it's not just happening in France. There was a case in Lakenheath in 1956 in the UK, again, a military fighter jet, a Venom in this case, that was just buzzing pilots for about 10 minutes. Cases in the US again in the late 50s, and also a really seminal case that took place in Tehran in Iran, which is a famous case. It's one of the most, I would say, useful cases because it's just so well documented. And that took place in Tehran, or over Tehran, in 1976 in a Phantom jet. And this UFO basically disabled the weaponry of this fighter jet. And as soon as the aircraft disengaged, everything came back online. I mean, this is very commonly reported. They cover cases from Russia in the 90s, and managed to get declassified documents related to a General Maltsev, and these documents spoke about a kind of an intercept that happened with Russian Mirages, their jets, to study UFOs that were just sitting stationary in the sky. Argentina in 1997, a Boeing 727. I mean, the list is endless. But there is a case that they deal with. For me, it's a famous case that took place in France, in a beautiful little area in the southeast called Valençol. And you may have heard of this case, Chris. I mean, the national police, or the Gendarme National, or Gendarmerie Nationale, as they call it in France, investigated this, where basically a farmer, a kind of a lavender field farmer in this region of France, if you Google it, you just see endless miles of lavender fields, beautiful. And this farmer is just getting up early in the morning, and he walks out into the field, and there are these two little men, I suppose like small greys, with a tic-tac like craft sat behind them in the background, and they're collecting some of the lavender leaves from the plants. And they see him, and they just calmly turn around and enter the craft through a door that just opens. But he's paralyzed. He can't move. He's literally been rendered immobile, but he can move his eyes, he can breathe, he can think, but he physically can't move until they get into the craft, this tic-tac, which then turns to the vertical and just shoots up into the sky. And this is a famous case that took place in July of 1965. And this is in a freaking, US, French military think tank report. And it was seriously studied by like I said, the National Police of France. A huge grande enquête, a large inquiry of quality that took place on this affair. And it left, traces in the ground, and, amazing. Another one in the southern area of France, Trans-en-Provence. Provence is a beautiful green region in the south, very warm. And this one took place in the year I was born, in plain daylight in 1981. And it was gotta say it, double kind of T-shaped T-saucer, flying saucer object that just landed in somebody's garden. Amazing stuff. So it's the complete antithesis to this Pentagon report.
Now, I have to ask, out of all of those profound, amazing sightings and cases that they have in that report, how many would demonstrate that these, whatever we're dealing with, are a genuine threat?
This is the thing, Chris. I mean, it doesn't talk about threats. It says it's always possible. But, if there was a genuine threat, such as an invasion, for example, it would have already happened.
Well, even, engaging with one of our fighter pilots, or, attacking back if we happen to engage with them. Is there anything of that nature in any of these reports?
They mention the possibility, but each mention of this, they say it's highly unlikely, because it is highly unlikely.
Right.
Logically, it would have already happened.
Right.
And what was really interesting about this report is a clear suspicion of the US and the authorities in the US, in that they even talk about, the General Twining Air Material Command that surrounded a load of UFO appearances in the late 40s after Roswell, and that the French suspect the recovered craft actually happened. There may have been more than one craft around Roswell, as we know. So they're highly suspicious. they're smart. They say that, look, our French cases officially predate your US cases, but you're probably not telling us about them in the US. They look at propulsion, the propulsion systems, try to explain what they are in a mature and open way. They even talk about the fact that when these craft or beings or objects are appearing, people's car engines are stopping. And they say, well, this could be microwaves, a bit like when that chap, the farmer, was immobilized in the field, in the lavender field in Valençol, like I talked about. So they take a really balanced view and they say, look, even parapsychology, this paranormal explanation, it can't be ruled out. And it even goes as far to say, look, only scientific hypotheses such as hidden government technology or secret technology from special access projects is impossible to sustain, especially for cases in the last 10 years. In other words, from 1987 to 1997. And the most likely explanation is extraterrestrial. They're dealing with this face to face without any problem at all. And they say, look, we need to understand the propulsion systems because we need to decide whether we're able to travel to the stars and set up our own Earth, human colonies to survive. I mean, this isn't a military report. Incredible. It even says that, what, if it is extraterrestrial, maybe they're people that originally were, or beings from Earth that migrated from Earth and maybe settled in the asteroid belt or other planets around our solar system. And that can't be excluded either. I like the fact that they deal with the whitewash of the conclusion on Project Blue Book. And as you and others know, that Project Blue Book was basically this US Air Force study between 1947 to 1969 to analyze all these UFO sightings. But the problem was that this physicist called Condon basically disregarded all the evidence and said, no, there's no real advancement in science or explanation or developments in science or in the sciences that can happen through the study of UFOs. But many scientists disagreed with him. And they said, but look, you're contradicting the evidence in this report. And, there was a Freedom of Information request that happened, I think it was in October of 1969, for example, and the event that occurred. Because, the Freedom of Information Act in the States, I think that was in around 74. So as soon as this Freedom of Information Act comes in, somebody finds this letter from an Air Brigade general called Bollender in the States. And he's basically writing in this letter, openly admitting that the US Air Force does continue to monitor these UFOs. And it's very much based on, or within the context of threats, which is exactly where we are still in 2021 with this Pentagon report. Whereas we have this complete antithesis with the French report that says nothing to worry about. It's happening. Threat is always going to be possible, but it's not probable. It's improbable. And in fact, the French military anticipated a peaceful presence. They go as far to say that. And they say, well, they're asking the questions. Do they simply want to observe us? And then they go on to say, it could be to warn us of a potential nuclear holocaust because we're playing around with nuclear testing and weapons. Or it could be to stop us from sending weaponry or explosives into space because it could have an impact across their area of space, even if it was, say, to kind of divert incoming asteroids, which is a reasonable thing to try and do, but it could have an impact. And,
this report that we're discussing, the more I hear about it, the more it makes me just realize that our government, our military is probably, hiding so much because they have so much advanced technology already. Some of these, black op factions probably have, reverse engineered everything, and if we were to kind of admit that we knew a little bit more about this, and I don't think we know how to approach that and not give ourselves away, you know? I
Yeah.
think we have a lot at stake, and especially if we're running with a secret space program that goes, beyond the moon, even possibly beyond Mars. We could have operations already out there. That's really something that we wouldn't want getting out into the public, especially with some of the technologies that are associated with this supposed secret space program. So
Yes.
yeah, the more I hear about this report, and this was in the '90s, I'm sure a lot has changed. I don't know if any alliances have been formed with these secret factions or in the
But it's a
meantime.
very
But
good point, Chris, because I heard through a former uh, elite military soldier, a French soldier, who, by the way, happened to be walking over the Pont d'Alma in Paris the moment that Princess Diana died in '97, bizarrely. And he says that he had a contact who was literally a French intelligence officer who was basically moving location every 6 months. And he was informed in a bar by this guy because they're both soldiers, but this guy happened to go into intelligence. And he said that the French military or the French Ministry of Defense have been in contact with a small gray species. So that's just anecdotal, and something that happened after this report came out in '99. So it's interesting,
yeah, that is
and
interesting.
God knows what they're doing. I mean, even Dr. Stephen Greer has been some years ago he was brandishing a letter that the French Ministry of Defense wrote to him to thank him for a field trip that he did with a group of generals in the north of France, where apparently it was in plain daylight. He did the C5 contact, and a load of purple orbs or UFOs showed up in front of an audience of French generals and military, staff. So there hasn't been a huge amount of, concrete evidence apart from these anecdotal points and some limited documentary evidence coming out. But the kind of groundwork in this Cometa report that was given to the Prime Minister of France in '99 is just, it's all there, and it's the antithesis of this frankly piece of crap from the Pentagon. And I know that many of our colleagues in the UFO field have said, look, it's a start. It is a start, but it's a misleading start, in my opinion, because it's not looking at the wider evidence. And maybe we'll just go over that. I mean, the
Sure.
French report talks about the secrecy. It mentions, Colonel Philip Corso releasing the day after Roswell in '97, exactly 50 years after the Roswell crash happened, which would have fallen outside, I suppose, of the Official Secrets Act at the time, or whatever the law was in or is in the States. And it says we need to have cooperation with the European Union, with the United States, with NATO. We need to have protocols put in place with the French Space Agency, with the Air Force and the civil aviation bureaus, and all of these, sensible suggestions. It even goes as far to say we need to break our bad habits as kind of, a civilization hooked on politics and religion, which is going to get in the way of advancing. So, it comes up with a series of conclusions and suggestions which are far more useful than what we see in the Pentagon report. And it opens the conclusions by saying in French, we must not laugh at the UFO problem because it's not funny and there's too much evidence and there's too many serious implications happening. It even goes to say, we need and I'm quoting you here, a cosmic vigilance is now required from now on, to kind of avoid to disarm possible media manipulation. So, I mean, this is a truly independent and smart report that's coming out.
Right.
And then they end by saying, look, the goals or the objectives of these visitors are not known, but they must be, we must speculate reasonably about this. And we have a series of recommendations informing the political leadership and military leadership and, the administrations, civil aviation pilots, helicopter pilots. They need to learn about this in, flight school. That's what it says. Uh, we need to have military research dedicated to this and financed. We need the resources to do it across all the different agencies, surveillance systems, so many things. The highest level of state needs to be involved at the and link into the French space agency, and it's just so much more interesting and laudable. And there's a notable difference, Chris, between the French report and this Pentagon report, and that's the kind of series of explanations that they offer, and I'll go into that. If you like, I'll kind of compare. I'll go into the Pentagon report and try and cover a few things that are more subtle.
Yeah,
but
we
if
can
you
do
have
some
any other
comparisons.
questions, just jump in.
Sure, we'll do.
All right. So yeah, I mean, we've heard so much about this Pentagon report of the 25th of June of this year, and like I mentioned earlier, there's this continuation, sadly, of the inertia of Project Blue Book, which was, like I said, between 1947 to 69, officially denied UFOs and that they were of little interest to advance the sciences. And although Blue Book was criticized by the scientists, and I think they were the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronomy, or Astronautics at the time, they said, look, there's this contradiction. Then we had the Freedom of Information Act confirming that this stuff was continually being monitored. And then here we are in 2021, and we get 6 pages of a very generic, circumstantial, limited look at the UFO reality within the States. It's all about threats. In the introduction, there's 4 mentions of the word threat, completely the opposite of the French report, the military report. And it says that it's for the intelligence community to organize and to understand, not the little people or with the social kind of implications that the French military are talking about here. And, we're only looking at events that took place between November 2004 to March 2021, which is we're choosing to be blind. That's what it says. I mean, embarrassingly, it goes in to say that the majority of them are from 2017 to 2021 only.
Yeah.
I mean, it's embarrassing.
It is.
And that they're mainly from the US Navy. And I think that anyone that really studies this phenomena knows that the US Navy are probably the good guys that are trying to advance the study and actually are more relaxed about releasing this. We've been told that there's been kind of conflicting views as to what the classified version of this report looks like. And there was talk that it might be leaked or it should have been leaked by now. Some say it's 70 pages long. Others say it's 400 pages long. I mean, there's a huge variance there of length, which is basically this Appendix B to the report. That's what it would be. If we look at the Pentagon report, there's 20 or so alphabet agencies listed. And the one that I mentioned to you the other day, Chris, that doesn't appear is, take a guess?
The CIA.
It's the CIA. Well done. So, I mean, very interesting. I mean, the CIA has domestic influence, but also international. These are the guys that should be going over to other governments and intelligence agencies to feed in. And of course, they're not there, and it's deliberate. And
well, they are the largest drug dealers on the planet. So, I mean, it's to be expected.
Wow. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, no, I just got to be honest, really.
No, there is plenty on this subject around the drug trade. I'm aware of it. I don't know the details
among other dirtiness that we won't get into tonight, but
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of things too, and you know a lot more about that than me. But as to this report, I mean, the fact that they're not there is just it sticks out like a sore thumb. So either the CIA are they're closing down the information deliberately by not being there. They either want closer control or they won't cooperate. Who knows? But I would have thought that they've been doing a lot of orchestration and behind the scenes. And the fact that they're not here speaks volumes. Overall, it's a silly report in that it kind of ignores everything that this military report from France says. It's like a false agnosticism, as in we can't decide whether it's real or not. After all the strong evidence that's been going back for decades, nearly 100 years, and a cover up that we officially know has been running since the 20s or 30s before Roswell in the States. There's no mention whatsoever of ETs or extraterrestrial origins, very disappointing and unrealistic. But there are some nuanced hints at that jump around in this report. And the two issues we're going to look at in a bit, and it's very subtle, but it kind of jumps around and it's hidden in jargon so that the kind of average, Joe public isn't really going to think too much. The executive summary talks about a limited amount of high quality reporting being available, which is rubbish, but that's what they say. But they kind of parrot the French report and say, but well, these do represent physical objects, and they're mainly registered on, they call it sensors, multiple sensors. So, radar, tech, whatever, infrared, electro, optical, weapon seekers, and visual observations. What it does is shrinks down these kinds of explanations into 5 categories. There's airborne clutter, natural atmospheric phenomena, so ice, that kind of thing, United States government or US industry developmental programs, whatever that means, whether that includes, the special access programs or black projects, as people like to call them, foreign adversary systems, and then there's this kind of interesting 5th category, the catch-all other bin, which could be anything. So there is some overlap with the French military report, that it says, yes, it could be a foreign adversary, or they don't call them an adversary. They just say, foreign technology. But the French report goes further. It says, well, it could be paranormal, unseen forces that we don't understand. It's possibly scientific, and it's probably maybe it's not scientific, but it's a reality.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm sure a lot of this is, because we have a lot of reverse engineer technology, we know a lot, but it's also probably because we don't know a lot, and we don't understand what's going on. It's probably beyond human comprehension to some levels. Right. So it may be terrifying to some of these factions that they can't understand this stuff. I don't know, because it seems to all be connected into some weird paranormal,
yep.
cluster.
And the French report is honest enough to say, well, it could be paranormal. It could be disinformation, it could be, within the context of the Cold War cases, and even up to now, it could be, governments or whoever making us think it's ET when it's not, which is unlikely because the technology is so advanced. They even go as far to say it could be holographics, as in, there was this kind of theory connected to Blue Book about a kind of false alien invasion or whatever. And it says, well, yeah, it could be holographics, and that could either be extraterrestrial or it could be man-made, human. But they say it's very hard to pull off. And then the final kind of part of this French report says, well, it's most likely ETs. Could be in the asteroid belt, could be a lost civilization or advanced civilization from Earth. And that's the most likely explanation. But with this Pentagon one, it's just this other catch-all, put it in this basket, have no explanation for the public in this unclassified report. And the report just says we need to organize and formalize reporting. That's what it's basically saying. And it pretends not to know anything about the phenomena, insulting all of our intelligence and flying in the face of decades of
it was mainly an insult. Yeah.
It is an insult, in my opinion. That's what it is. It is a start. If you're a member of the public and you don't even think about this subject, it might be, intriguing or curious, but it's frankly pathetic.
I think after 2017, the public should be beyond that point, and I think the majority of people honestly are ready to hear this, and they already know it. I don't think it would be a huge shocker.
Most of you guys in the States have a persuaded that extraterrestrials exist. There's been surveys on this, and there's a reason that they're doing surveys on this. They know. It's saying that the Navy is where this is coming from, because I think they are more transparent. They want to genuinely advance this in the public sphere.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of like, let's not mention the CIA and the black projects or whatever.
Well,
Let's
I
keep
also
it to
think when
the
it comes to military factions, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and
absolutely. And this
it's
is what I think the report is secretly hinting at. There's a section we'll talk about that. I mean, it goes into say, look, there's stigma, or our information's crap because there's stigma amongst the personnel. Oh yeah, our sensors are limited. I mean, it's pathetic. And the percentage of cases that are high quality, tiny.
yeah.
So you know, and it's well, if the military equipment happens to pick it up, then we can go to that. And I think that with these appearances that happened around these training exercises of the Navy, it's either genuine extraterrestrial or other intelligences that are doing it in front of the people most likely to document this, absent this problem of true willpower to disclose. Or it's the military just trying to stage something and slowly break us in with technology that they have. That's how I see it.
There's
And
also this strange kind of mainstream media aspect that I've noticed, and I have friends that in this kind of space, in this mainstream space, and I'm not talking bad about any of these guys. I love all these guys, but there's some strange things going on, even in our community, even in our space. I don't know if we've been infiltrated. I don't want to say that, but there is some interesting
possible.
things going on, especially when it comes to some of the bigger players in this. Like I'll mention Danny Sheehan because he's like one of the huge, biggest players when it comes to mainstream UFO disclosure. Because he's the government lawyer. He's the guy involved with this. And then I'll mention Lou Elizondo. Those are the only two I'm gonna put out there right now because they're the big ones, and we can talk about them because I think they can handle it. I think they're big boys. But I just find it odd that all of a sudden now these two big players are involved with all the talk shows and the mainstream media. They're coming out with this information, and I'd never spoken with Lou Elizondo. I'd love to have him on the show.
You
Um,
should
I should, yes. I
go
just
for it.
I feel like there's some things that he knows that he's not disclosing,
Sure.
and I question the involvement with Danny Sheehan and why all of a sudden they're just in the mainstream disclosing this. They seem to be kind of at the same time going along with the mainstream disclosure, at the same time butting heads with it, and then we have this drama with Stephen Greer. It all
Yeah.
seems way too dramatic and strange. I don't know I just can't put my finger on it, but
Yeah.
something's off, something's weird. I don't know. You get that
Yeah. I
feeling?
think. Yeah, I do, and I know that you interviewed Danny Sheehan at Laughlin. I mean, I don't know if you managed to have an offline chat with him about this, but
When not much because he was running around, but I'd had that little
uh-huh.
interview. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, I think that I think these guys are what they want to get this out, but they know that they can't if they can't go too far. There's probably too many consequences on their shoulders and their families. Who knows? We just don't know. I found it quite interesting that Danny Sheehan has now, formally distanced himself from Dr. Stephen Greer
right. Yeah,
after he saw a kind of what he says is a miscontextualization of his feedback in
it's like
the
a
most
UFO
recent
soap opera drama or something. I don't know. Crazy.
yeah. And so and I have to say, Dr. Greer has done a great job and he's done a lot for this movement, but that you can't avoid some of the obvious issues with the narrative that he comes out with at times in terms of abductions are purely a industrial military complex
Right.
phenomena,
Yeah. Yeah.
and even maligning some of the kind of let's say uh, bloodline aristocratic classes that it's not all black and white. Some of them actually, I understand, do want disclosure because they're genuinely interested and they have the time and the money and the resources to actually look into this. And some of them have had experiences. So my issue with Dr. Greer is that he's very black and white about this because I think he does want people not to be afraid, and that's a good thing. He's right, but you shouldn't lie about things that or
Right.
misrepresent. Let's put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to mischaracterize him. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of this tension that's happening at that kind of level, and there are certain actors who are trusted with the authorities, the government, who are able to come out with certain things, but I think they're being given limited information, and they know that they can't overstep their remit, and it's unfortunate. There is
Yep.
what, Chris, we're talking about this, hidden technology. I I don't know. There's something that tells me on page 5 of this report. There's a little section at the bottom of page 5 that talks about within the context of UAP, probably lacking a single explanation, which is pretty obvious. And then when it goes into this kind of United States government or industry developmental programs, it says that some UAPs or their observations could be attributable to developments and classified programs by US entities. So it doesn't say the US government, it says US entities. And we were unable to confirm, however, that these systems accounted for any of the UAP reports we collected. So it's saying this may not be United States government, and they may be signaling through this one tiny little 3-line paragraph that there's a problem. Because I think that the government deliberately, for reasons of social context and money making and privatizing the technology, they got it out of the government within the government, and they put it into the the industrial military complex, knowing that it's off the books and it's unaccounted for, but certain fortunate people within the administration or the machinery have access to both worlds. And that's why there are presidents that got told that they don't have a need to know basis on seeking information from this. I'm thinking Bill Clinton and his chief of staff, for example, and also President Jimmy Carter, who was just put to one side by the then head of the CIA, George Bush Senior, Herbert Walker. So I think that this report is very subtly signaling that we've got a problem that's out of control. It's in the private hands. We may or may not have created that problem ourselves. And it's too subtle. But I kind of get that energy when I read it. I think they're trying to tell us, but they can't say it. Mentions this, potential foreign government or adversary with a breakthrough aerospace technology, but it doesn't say who. It won't name Russia or China or India. So yeah, very, very, very limited in help and scope. Does talk about the fact that they're going to start using AI to try to learn about the phenomena that's new to the Pentagon, apparently, because now the ombudsman stepped in, and as soon as this report came out, it was like a pantomime, theater. And then suddenly the Undersecretary of Defense writes a letter to the Department of Defense saying, "What's going on? We need to organize," as if nobody knew about this. It's funny. I mean, the US kind of approach is I have to say, it's so immature compared
Yes.
to the brainy, reasonable, cerebral explanations that this military think tank of generals and scientists have come up with in
And
France in
unfortunately,
the
I
late
think it's
90s.
because they believe that Americans are that stupid that we'll just go along with it. Some of us are, but not all of us.
No comment, Chris. I couldn't possibly say that as a British Mauritian national.
Right. Understand. Yes.
But I love this, just reading the two reports side by side. And the US has really messed up. I mean, it was a brilliant opportunity to at least put something in there.
Well, do you
that,
think anything else is going to come out of it? I mean, do you think
I'm
public
hoping.
reaction or disgust is enough for them to kind of put out more?
Well, yeah, I mean, there has been this media circus, predictably, around the Pentagon report, and yet there was nothing with the French one, which was far more impressive.
Yeah.
But what I'm hoping, although I'm not encouraging anyone to break the law, obviously, is to see the leaked version of this come out. And, there's some saying that it's 70 pages in length in this classified version, and others say it's actually 400 pages when you include the appendices. So yeah, and it hasn't happened yet. So I'm waiting for a leak, and then hopefully from that, whether it's a staged one that's deliberately done by the Pentagon or not, I mean, I think that will help. But again, I think even that, the senators are not going to be read into the true, the dirty truth of how this went into government, outside of the constitutional machinery that Danny Sheehan talks about, and into these special access projects that, as Richard Dolan, the historian on UFOs, terms a runaway civilization, because they've been developing this stuff for decades. And we've even got the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, at I believe an alumnus event, saying we have the technology to take ET back to the stars, and we're 10,000 years ahead. I mean, how can you ignore all these kind of things? And
you can't. But I
you're
think at
literally
the same
just doing this and saying no. Most of the cases that we're
Right.
looking at from 2017 and to 21. And the quality of the information.
But I think
rubbish.
at the same time, you have to be careful, because I think some of the information is just disinformation put out there to confuse people and not keep us on the right track. So we have to be discerning, with this information.
True.
But
That's the thing. I mean, I believe that regardless of the fact that we're still a juvenile species, as we can tell from this UAP report from the Pentagon, we need to know the truth, whether or not we can handle it. And something I spoke about recently, Chris, was the fact that I think that we are going to be allowed to develop kind of, let's call it halfway house technology that allows us to travel to the stars and space travel and, amazingly fast travel here on planet Earth. But it won't be fully fledged kind of anti-gravity, time space manipulating technology. It's more likely to be a superconducting material that allows this levitational effect and lack of resistance to happen. And there was a very interesting explanation about this by Mr. X on who described the Admiral Wilson leaks, and he talks about how electrons are being manipulated to work in pairs, and this is how this levitational technology is working within the special access black project world. It's not fully fledged anti-grav, according to him. So even maybe they haven't even got that far, but they're still, millennia ahead, even with that.
yeah,
And let's be honest, I don't think ET would give us an equivalent technology to what they have.
no, probably not.
With
No,
their IQ.
Yeah, what's
Would
that?
you do that?
Oh no!
Would you do that?
Hell, no, I would. If and I put it this way: and if I was a highly advanced species, and I'm just cruising by the planet, and we do a little close-up look as to what's going on in there, I'd be like, I don't even think I want to
Head
stop
back.
by there. I'm gonna keep cruising along the universe. But maybe they have some interest, some vested interest in us. Because of
maybe
who knows?
we are a multi-species experiment,
Right.
and that they do come and they go. The times that they were here are documented in art form and folkloric kind of transmission.
Now you
And
said
then they go, and then they come back, and they're like, "Oh, what are the kids up to?"
Yeah,
Oh.
you said experiment, and that's kind of one of the magic words for me as trying to understand all this, because it's one of the huge possibilities for me lately. Either an experiment, or we're actually choosing to incarnate on this existence, this planet, because it was put here as some kind of a learning or training experience. I'm kind of battling between the two. Is this a spiritual experience, or are we on a prison planet experiment?
I think the answer
I don't
is
know.
both. Carry on.
Yes,
Yeah,
that would be
yeah.
great. That'd be a great answer, because I think that it would explain everything, and it'd be a horrible answer because it's terrifying. But it's fascinating to take in all these possibilities. I don't know, to close out tonight. What do you think? Because it's all connected. All my past recent guests for the past couple of years have been coming together to this culmination of trying to compare notes with ufology, paranormal, metaphysical, spiritual, consciousness, everything that I cover, because it's all connected in some way. It's just, what is this connection? How is it all connected? And, just trying to make sense of it all. So, what do you think? Maybe give us a little bit of insight.
All right. Actually, I mean, as you know from my our discussions and my presentation in Laughlin, I absolutely think this is a spiritual issue that's being played out in a multidimensional and physical, in our realm, playing field. So to deny connection and the spiritual dimension is to completely miss the point. And I totally agree with you, Chris. I think that we are now, we desperately need, and we are, need to move away from this kind of observational ufology. And it's only so helpful. So, it is real. We know it's real. Even both of these reports say it's physically real. They mirror each other in that respect. I think there is absolutely a consciousness phenomena happening that links between us and the phenomena. And we are manifesting it and that it's also codependent on us. There's an element of trickery and elusiveness that's deliberate, so that we learn more about ourselves. I think it's definitely across, let's call them the dimensions. And I'm not saying that there has to be, and science, in fact, says the dimensions don't need to be infinite. It only needs to be a limited number, and maybe like the French report talks about this kind of paranormal or otherworldly realities or powers that may be linking to this. We can call them divine laws. Maybe there's this kind of divine firewall or system of intelligence that is operating all forms of reality, including the back end of, the third dimension or the four dimensions that we have here when you include time, all together. And maybe that as children, our senses have been atrophied, have been cut back because of the way that we're socialized and the social conditioning that occurs. And maybe these are the enemies of consciousness and conscience. So there's a lot going on.
I know what our next show is going to be about, JP. We're gonna go deep next time.
Yeah, we'll go deep. I always do when we chat. I would say this though, Chris. Despite all this technology implication and multiple different species, they're not separate from us. They're not inferior to us, but they're not superior to us either. Everything has its divine place in my view, and I think that that if there are, in some of the cases we're looking at AI beings sort of hunting down other terrestrial species that created it because they're so, it's super intelligent, but it hasn't got let's call it the divine spark that we have as spiritual beings, as opposed to pure AI. I mean, this is in the amicizia cases of the 60s to the 80s that occurred across Italy and Europe. And this is in my view, the largest kind of mass sighting cases that have been documented ever. And the beings have been interacting with, university professors, that kind of thing. And they're literally saying we're fleeing a form of AI that we created that wants to destroy us because we have what it doesn't. So the cases tell us there's a spiritual dimension within us and within them. So that may make us equals. I don't think they're, and I don't think that, we can look at it simply from human notions of good and bad and, allies and adversaries. I think it's far more sophisticated. I think like in the cases of abductions, which are absolutely a real phenomena and not categorically not simply military, from the cases and, the work of Professor and Dr. John Mack of Harvard, who studied this and covered some amazing cases. I mean, he even went on to Oprah Winfrey with one of his contactees who had the guts to go out and do that back in the 90s, I believe, or early 2000s. So it does go into a spiritual dimension. It goes into questions of ultimate creation and the creator. It goes into a management system of reality or realities, of forces and beings and intelligences that inhabit these worlds or dimensions, densities, whatever we want to call them. And, if there is this unique and multiple intelligence or creator, are we just the product of a dream or a thought of this divine being that's creating all these dramatic realities? And who are the messengers that go between these worlds? Is that what we're seeing, or are we creating it ourselves, like the Jungian kind of construct with consciousness? And are we seeing these beings come to us as a product of the true nature of reality in this reality, in that it's a feedback of some kind? Who is watching over us and communing with us? And what watches over them and communes with them or observes them? So, it's that kind of who watches the watchers.
Right.
When we talk about dimensions, are they immediate or are they intermediate? Are there stages of reality? And maybe we're at the back end in this kind of denser duality of 4 dimensions. And maybe that everything visible is the proportional measure of the invisible. Like we started out this conversation talking about, the fact that many people that have interactions and experiences are having changes around their physiology or their psychology or their psyche. So, yeah, I think that, what is invisible and what is visible are equally important. We need to try and understand it, and hopefully over time we can. So, yeah, there are huge questions that come out of this subject, and it all starts with a silly Pentagon report and a much more enlightened report from France back in the 90s.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like I said, I had never even known that report existed. I'm glad you came across it and got to present it to everybody. So now everyone knows about this. It's great.
You're most welcome. And I mean, I'm lucky because I speak and understand, and I'm French educated. I practiced English and French law in Mauritius. So, I think that's the thing. It's the language in the West, in the States. It's not as accessible, obviously, because it's in a foreign language, but it's so well written, Chris. I know I keep saying it, but it's 116 pages, for God's sake. It's taken them 3 years to make, not like this rubbish that's come out of the Pentagon.
Right.
In 6 pages, effectively, or unclassified version.
Yeah, if you could just send me a link to that, and I will put a link to it in the description. So if the audience wants to thumb through it, they can take a look at that.
Definitely.
Awesome. Yeah. Great, JP. That was fantastic information as usual. And like I said, we're going to have to go really deep next time, what you were saying there towards the end. I think a lot of my audience may have their brains melting out of their ears a little bit because it might have had their minds
already.
blown.
Don't worry.
But yeah, awesome stuff, JP. And we're going to have to talk again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to, Chris. Always a pleasure. Congratulations on the huge amount of material you're putting out. And one thing I want to say is that, what I appreciate is that you're putting out all these different aspects and information that some will just say it's crazy. But the point is that because we're going into these deeper, invisible and abstract aspects to the phenomena, we can't dismiss anything, and it has to be put out there. And we need to be open to the information and not just sort of shut it down. And when you have, the military saying it's possibly paranormal or greater forces, then, we should start listening. Not get so developed.
Especially if it's not our military, we might want to listen a little bit more.
Yeah, well,
not the American military, at least. Right.
Uncle Sam.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, JP, that was great stuff, and like I said, we're going to talk again soon, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Most welcome, Chris. Take care, my friend.
Awesome. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again soon.